How we doing? It's IB Nation Sports Talk, and we are here, and we are ready to go on this Friday. Vince just got done on one side, and he jumped over to this side.
Ready to go, baby. Yo, 4 hours, piece of cake.
Nothing, right?
Piece of cake. Getting used to it. I've got my sea legs under me for the Friday free-for-all mailbag, and we had some great questions today. So this is going to be fun.
Good. I'm glad you liked it.
Yeah, and so, but today, like, during the show, I was thinking about this show and my rankings because
about which way you're going to go with some of these. Huh?
I'm going to get hammered, I have a feeling, for some of my rankings, but
it's tough. It's tough. And, you know, what Vince is talking about is we're going to rank our top 5 all-time Notre Dame football players. We're each going to do that here in just a second. Got this idea because Julian Love, the former Notre Dame cornerback, former New York Giant as well, for that matter, he's with the Seattle Seahawks. He signed with the Seahawks this offseason, but he guest hosted for a couple days on Good Morning Football on the NFL Network this week. And the first day he was on, they asked him to do his top 5 all-time Notre Dame players.
That's crazy.
Honestly, I think his list is more controversial than the one that we're gonna, whatever we serve up here. So,
can you
want to
divulge his list, because I'm very curious.
I didn't, when I sent you guys the questions, I didn't send what his was because I didn't want to, paint yours, and I didn't really look too closely. I knew what the top of his list was. So here's Julian Love's all-time top 5 Notre Dame players. Number 5, Manti Teo.
Okay.
Number 4, Jerome Bettis.
Okay.
Number 3, Raghib Rocket Ismail. Number 2, Joe Montana. And number 1, Tim Brown on Julian Love's list. So that's his top 5. All very modern. The oldest player in that bunch is Joe Montana. And just like earlier this week, when we did our ranking of the top 10 current players on the Notre Dame roster, we left this very open-ended, open to interpretation, whatever direction you wanted to go with your top 5. Jesse was originally going to do this with us, but he had a mix-up. He's going to a friend's wedding, and he looked at the date. He thought it was a Saturday wedding. Turns out it's a Friday wedding, and they've got to drive to Michigan. So,
whoops.
Yeah, and then he's got to get up because he's got to coach a Little League game at 10:30 tomorrow morning. He's got to get up and do that. So,
Jesse.
Yeah, it's, on top of the fact that he doesn't have a car right now, that makes it even, easier. So
the first thing that would have gone on my list would be the wedding. Like, I'm sorry, I'm not going to make it.
Well, it is one of his closer friends from college wedding, and he was telling me last night that he's actually friends with both the bride and groom. They all went to school together, and I guess he took he was a math major, and the bride, his friend's, wife tonight is a math major as well. So they were in like all the same classes together.
Gotcha.
And, the guy, they played football together and all that kind of stuff.
Gotcha.
So, yes. Father David says that Vince will be the only guy with a kicker in the top 5. Is John Carney? Is John Carney on your list?
John Carney is the most tenured NFL player to ever come out of Notre Dame. So,
in terms of length, yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Longest tenured.
Right.
So, I mean, I'm just saying.
We'll see. All right, so let's do this just like we did the other day. We won't each go through our list. We'll just start at number 5. And then let me grab a notepad so I can kind of keep track of who we've got. Who is your number 5, Vince D'Addario, on your all-time Notre Dame football player list?
So do we want to give our criteria first?
You can if you want. I mean, I really didn't. I didn't really set a strict set. Look, I'm not going to go. I'm going to tell you this. Knute Rockne is not on my list. Like, if you included playing and coaching, I think Knute Rockne has to be on the list. And, like, you can make a case that, Knute, with the forward pass, he's credited in some circles with inventing the forward pass. Others would say he just essentially advanced the forward pass, I guess you would say. But, like
Gus Dorier should be on the list before Knute Rockne.
Right. And Tom Landry was an innovator, when he was a coach and all that kind of stuff. And I don't consider him, like he created the flex defense and a lot of shifting and all this different stuff. I don't consider him the best coach of all time. So just because maybe Newt was an early innovator,
Sure.
I'm not going to put him on there as a player because this is a players only list. It is not a coach list.
And so my basic criteria was when I started watching Notre Dame football. So really like the 92, 93 era until now is the kind of what I focused on.
You're going to leave a lot of good players off your list if that's what
I'm aware, but okay. I'm going with the Brian criteria because I can't put players on the list that I never saw play.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And so that helped me narrow it down because if I didn't do that, my goodness, like it's an exponential list.
Well, I'll say this. I saw all but one of the guys on my list play. Okay. And the one who I didn't see play, like while he was still active, there was enough NFL films and stuff like that I, it's crazy how like, even with the NFL Network, a lot of that old school NFL film stuff that we grew up with, watching. I don't know how much you watch, but like, you don't really see it as much. But I remember, growing up seeing a lot of, I won't give it away, but a lot of him, with this certain team that was a, part of a dynasty, when he was playing. So
does that mean he was a better NFL player than a college player?
Well,
am I gonna have to pick at you here a little bit?
Or no? When we get to it.
Fair enough. So
I think there's a case that he was great at both, especially when I'll rattle off some of his credentials for you.
Fair enough.
Who's your number 5, Vince?
So my number 5 is the bus, Jerome Bettis. He was arguably my first favorite player as I became a Notre Dame fan. It was when he was at the height of his Notre Dame-ness, right? So Jerome Bettis
is the height of his Notre Dame-ness.
Yes. Jerome Bettis is my number 5. And I will also say I'm sure my list is going to get ripped to shreds by people, and I'm sure I forgot somebody. Somebody that's on your list is gonna I will have missed. I'm sure of it. But
I don't know because 5 is pretty tight as it is.
Super tight.
Yeah, it really is. Like 10 makes it a little bit easier, but even then, when you're talking about a place like Notre Dame with as many great players who have come and gone through here, Bettis is on my list.
Fast. Yeah. Anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
Now Bettis is on my list as well. I've got him one spot higher at number 4.
That sounds familiar.
And I mean, I know. Like the other day, pretty much everyone, like you would name him, and I'm like, well, I've got him 2 spots higher. I mean, what's crazy about Jerome Bettis, there's a little bit just what we've seen so far. A lot of people want to talk about the size and the power of Audric Estime, but the most yards Bettis ever ran for at Notre Dame, 972 in 1991. And that was, of course, he's probably, I think most people probably remember him for the big Sugar Bowl performance against the Florida Gators, rumbling downfield and all that stuff, that same 1991 season, but he was the number 10 overall draft pick by the Rams in the 93 draft.
I don't think I realized that.
Yeah, after the most he ever ran for was 9-7, but again, there was a lot of talent in those backfields. Reggie Brooks was back there with him, and he had like Ricky Waters. I think like he and Ricky Waters overlapped at one point. There was a lot of talent back then coming through those backfields.
Yes, there was.
Notre Dame, but he goes on. He rushes. He's NFL Rookie of the Year, rushing for over 1,400 yards. That was when Chuck Knox was the coach of the Rams, and then Knox is gone. They bring in Rich Brooks, who wants to throw the ball all over the place. And it's like, you can still hand the ball off even with a passing offense, but Rich Brooks didn't know what to do with Jerome Bettis. They trade him to Pittsburgh. Of course, he goes on to rush for over 1,000 yards 7 more times.
Hall of Fame career.
Pro Football Hall of Fame, wins a Super Bowl,
the
whole thing. And that's, again, like I don't think that there is probably a world, especially in modern Notre Dame history, where you can leave Jerome Bettis off that list.
Agreed.
One of the greats. My number 5, though, this might be the controversial.
Ooh, already.
I'll be curious to see what you think about this. I've got Jalen Smith at number 5.
You would think it would be controversial, except I had him at number 4.
All right. So basically, we've got our 5s and our 4s flipped around.
Which I am not shocked that you have him on the list, but I thought that would be the one that I would get the most pushback on. I really did. And I thought you specifically might have Jalen Smith PTSD because he played for the Cowboys and arguably didn't go very well.
Well,
because of the injury and all of that. But yeah.
And that's how I like when you look at the career that Jalen Smith had, as a freshman, one of the top recruits in the entire country. I think, top outside linebacker that year. He comes in, starts right away as a true freshman, and of course goes on by his junior year, becomes an All-American. And like he was basically the bright spot, the eraser on the horrible Brian Van Gorder defense.
Could have been so much better if he had a better coordinator. I mean, can you imagine if he played like Will linebacker?
I know.
In anybody else's defense that has been at Notre Dame? Like, oh, man.
And that's if not for that gruesome injury, I think right now we're talking about Jalen Smith as, with the kind of body type that he has, the quick twitch and the length and just the change of direction that he had, everything, the instincts that he had when he was at Notre Dame. Like if he still had all that, if not for that injury, I think right now, like 7 years and counting on, I think we're talking about him as potentially one of the all-time greats in NFL history. But
I agree.
as it was, that very unfortunate injury, like Manti Teo obviously had more accolades. They both won the Butkus Award, but yeah. So I've got Smith at number 5. You've got him at number 4, and then boom, boom, we've knocked off 5 and 4 right away for both of us.
Crazy. And Jalen Smith, I mean, there was talk he was going to be the number 1 overall draft pick for a little while there.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, just unbelievable, and he's the poster child for obviously not playing in a bowl game and all of that. And to this day, I'm glad he did, but at the same time, I would have loved to follow his NFL career. He wouldn't have gone to the Cowboys, obviously. He would have gone someplace else, and I don't remember what the order was in that particular draft, but he would have been at the top of that draft and would have just been amazing. He would have been amazing.
Yeah. Even if he didn't go number 1, he was going to be probably at least top 3, but there's no way he would have fallen out of the top 5.
What year was that he was in the draft? What do you remember?
2016. And then
2016 NFL draft.
And then he sat out. He had to sit out his rookie season because of that injury. Didn't actually start playing until 2017. Yep.
Sure. Yeah, right. I just wanted to see what the order. So the Rams were first. They took Jared Goff. The Eagles were second. They took Wentz. The Chargers were third. They took Joey Bosa.
Interesting.
The Cowboys were fourth and took Ezekiel Elliott. So I guess he could have potentially gone to the Cowboys if he was
they would have had a decision to make. They had a desperate need at running back, and that was when they still had Tony Romo at that point, and they were building that with the offensive line that they had, and they were building that. They wanted to kind of go back to some old school running to try to take some pressure off Romo, and then of course he broke his back in preseason and all that stuff. But that's would have been an interesting decision to make there at the top of the draft for the Cowboys. That's right.
And the first linebacker off the board was Leonard Floyd to the Chicago Bears at number 9.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yep.
So just some interesting tidbits there. I'm, very
changed history for a lot of people, but especially for him, obviously.
Yeah, no doubt about it. No doubt.
All right, so we've each got our 5 and our 4. You've got Jerome Bettis at number 5, and then Smith at number 4. I've got Smith number 5, Bettis number 4. So what does number 3 look like for you?
Brady Quinn. I got Brady Quinn at number 3. Arguably the best quarterback that Notre Dame has had. You could say Jimmy Clausen, but from a statistical standpoint, Brady Quinn is the best quarterback they've had. I put him at number 3.
Don't have him on my list, but again, I've got a couple guys who are a little bit older than Brady Quinn who are going to show up on this list that you're not going to have. Like if I was looking at the parameters that you did, I've got no problem with it. But All time, I think it gets a little bit murkier.
Oh, I totally get that. Totally get that. In the time that I've been watching Notre Dame football, I think of him as the best quarterback that Notre Dame has had.
Yeah, for sure.
And I will say, this is where I would bring up potentially Sam Hartman as an honorable mention, depending on how this year goes. If he leads them to a national championship game or something along those lines, he could very well vault onto this list, to be honest with you.
Yeah, but with 1 year, that'd be
right. I mean,
and if that happens, we will definitely revisit this list after the season.
But wouldn't you say that he would be in discussion to make this list? I mean, is the missing link to get Notre Dame to a national championship? I mean,
you'd have to, but like you've got Bettis on your list. You don't have Tony Rice. Like Tony Rice was obviously an option quarterback who could throw. But, like Quinn is definitely the better pure quarterback, I would say. But Tony Rice, just what, basically on those parameters, he won a national championship.
But he's outside my viewing time. So that's why he doesn't make
that's right, because you made your cutoff around 92.
That's why Rocket's not on my list either. Oh, man. That's why he's not on my list, because he wasn't playing when
I don't know who's going to be on your list. Yeah, I think you need to rethink things a little bit, Mr. History major. You're already... You've saying. Already. This is kind of just a hot take with you, with these.
I told you,
like Brady Quinn, he's a great quarterback and all. But yeah, so my number 3 is Paul Hornung, and he was the one I was talking about, like NFL films, watching, old school. He started his Notre Dame career as a fullback, then he played some halfback and some safety, and then his Heisman season, 1956, when he became the only player to win a Heisman, or at least the last player to win a Heisman with a losing record. He led the team in passing, rushing, scoring, kickoff and punt returns, and punting. And he also played defense and led the team. So he led the team not just in passing, but in interception. He was second in interceptions, led the team in pass breakups as well. So like when you look at, why did he win a Heisman Trophy on a losing team? Well, one, he played for Notre Dame. 2, he did all that. And he also played basketball, by the way. And then, of course, he goes to the Green Bay Packers, number 1 overall draft pick, wins the NFL MVP while he's in Green Bay, helps the Packers win 4 NFL titles. That was before the Super Bowl, and then he helped them win Super Bowl 1 before he retired as well. And he's in both the pro and college football Hall of Fames. So Paul Hornung is on my list. Fair obviously enough. Goes back a little bit deeper in length than yours.
Yes, it does. So. Much deeper. But I get it. I understand why.
I mean, the Golden Boy, didn't call him the Golden Boy.
Well, there's 7 Heisman Trophy winners that are not on my list.
That's true. I mean, if your cutoff is 92, there are no Heisman Trophy winners on your list.
No Heisman Trophy winners. There's no national champions. There's no, there's no a lot of things. There's no 4 horsemen. There's no, you name it. They're not on my list because Notre Dame hasn't been, quote unquote, good in 30 years.
Sure. Okay, so Quinn is your 3. Hornung is my 3. Who's your number 2?
Manti Teo.
Okay.
Number 2. I mean, second in Heisman Trophy voting. He's the closest that any Notre Dame player has been within my time frame. So he's got to be on that list. He did, his stat line was pretty amazing. When you look at, for a middle linebacker, and that's why he ended up being second on the Heisman Trophy, but he did it in the big games, multiple interceptions against Michigan. He was a very, very good player and also a very, very good leader as well. And so that's why he made my list, and he's high up there.
Yep, for sure. My number 2 is Rocket Ismail. And there's no way that I'm leaving Rocket off this list. And 1988 was Notre Dame's national championship season, of course. And, Rocket was on that team. Def Leppard's last, I think what I would call big album, Hysteria, was out at the time. And they had a song called Rocket on it.
Okay.
And whenever I hear that song, I think of Rocket Ismail. When I think of, him, I think of that song. And like, Rick Allen's drums at the start. It's like the lead up, and I just think of rocket launch when I hear that. And I think, like a lot of people think of that bogus clipping call in the Colorado game, the 91-yard punt return that got called back. I like to think of Bo Schembechler being stupid enough to kick to Rocket twice in that game at Michigan Stadium when he returned 2 kickoffs for touchdowns against the Wolverines. Like if nothing else, Vince, like as much as you hate Michigan, like that's something that you should have on a loop in your house is like Rocket going crazy, but
on that crappy AstroTurf.
Yeah. I mean, like when Rocket was on the field, it's like, forget about going to the bathroom when there was a kickoff or a punt, it's like something was going to happen, and I think a lot of people forget, even though he didn't have a great NFL career, he did have a good career in Canada, and he helped Toronto win a championship up there. He was the Grey Cup MVP. Their Grey Cup is their Super Bowl up there. So Rocket is my number 2.
Fair enough.
So that takes us to number 1.
Do you have any inkling who my number 1 is going to be?
Man, I'm trying to think now who it could be because of like where your list starts and who you already have on it. The fact you have Manti at number 2, Quinn at number 3, and we're only talking the last 30 years. Man, how recent is it? Last 20 years?
Oh, yeah.
Last 10 years?
Yep.
Last 10. Well, you've already got Jalen Smith. I'm drawing a blank. Who is it?
Okay, I was curious. Quentin Nelson.
Oh, yeah, it's right as yes.
Yep.
Big Q.
Quentin Nelson, man. I think he's the best Notre Dame player in the last 10 years.
Well, except for Zach Martin.
There's that cowboy bias I was waiting for. But yeah, definitely Quentin Nelson. I mean, he was a game changer at his position. I mean, by far the best player at his position in the entire in college football, and it wasn't close. So Quentin Nelson's my number 1.
Quentin Nelson, he is a beast, and like with so many the fact that my list goes back much farther than yours, there's no way that I could include some of these current guys.
Totally get that.
Like I said, I think Jalen Smith is in the conversation for one of the all-time greats if it's not for that injury. He's the most recent guy I've got on the list. With your list being basically in the last 30 years, I think it makes a lot of sense for you to have him in there. But it probably hard to have 2 offensive linemen. Zach Martin would like to have a word, considering he's all but a lock right now for the Hall of Fame. I think Big Q has to play a few more years before he's in that kind of conversation.
Absolutely. So. And that's but he out of 4 out of the 5 years he's been an all-pro. So I mean,
right.
We're talking the NFL. So I mean, he's working his way up to that. But yeah, I mean, he was just so undeniably good when he was at Notre Dame. I mean, just so good.
Yep. So you've got Big Q at number 1. I've got Joe Montana, and there's just no way. Like before Tom Brady, there was a case for Joe Montana as the best player in NFL history, or at least the best quarterback.
And I held on to that for so long versus Tom Brady. Like held on to it and held on to it and held on to it, and just you can't make a logical argument versus Tom Brady anymore, unfortunately. And it pains me to say that because I just not a fan of Tom Brady by any stretch of the imagination since he went to Michigan. But I mean, yeah, but Montana is number 2.
Like if Montana had won another Super Bowl when he went to Kansas City, maybe he's still got a case. Like if he picked up a 5th one in Kansas City, but that it didn't happen that way.
Yeah,
right. Again, like Montana, he'll never be in the College Football Hall of Fame because it basically took him until his senior season.
Right.
And really it was like 4 games into his senior season before he actually even became a starter. They win the last 9 games, the Cotton Bowl, the whole thing. And obviously he goes on and rewrites history in San Francisco along with Bill Walsh. So Montana's my number 1. So I've got Jalen Smith at number 5, Jerome Bettis number 4, Paul Hornung number 3, Rocket number 2, Montana number 1. You've got Bettis 5, Jalen Smith 4, Brady Quinn 3, Manti Teo 2, and Quentin Nelson number 1. Shannon says, could you imagine Jalen Smith tackling Audric Estime today? That would be fun.
Go low.
Be a lot of, that's right. No matter what, go low. That's exactly right. All right, so good list. Very interesting list.
That was fun.
Yeah.
It was a daunting task. When I sat down and I'm like, top 5 players in Notre Dame history, I was like, I've got to narrow this down. It was making my head explode. I just couldn't do it.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously, we had to leave a lot of good
Oh my
players
gosh.
off the list, especially from those early days.
You could do like a top 50. I mean, and have some legitimate dudes on that list.
Mm-hmm. Coffees for Closer said Bob Crable was a beast at linebacker. I think he has more tackles than Manti.
He may, but back then they were running the ball a heck of a lot more than they were when Manti Teo was roaming the field too. I wonder, I'm not looking up Bob Crable's numbers, but I bet you Manti has more interceptions.
Yeah, you're probably right. That one season alone.
Right. Right.
D-Hawk said that was Montana's junior year. I thought that, now I won't get into that whole thing, but I will say this. Like, you know, I did leave Tim Brown off the list, even though he's Notre Dame's last Heisman winner. And like between like him and Rocket, I just felt like Rocket so much more dynamic. And I still do not understand how Ty Detmer from little BYU can throw 28 interceptions. He had 41 touchdown passes in 1990, but he threw almost 30 interceptions, and they gave him the Heisman Trophy over Rocket Ismail. I don't get it.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. So anyway, fill in the blank. It's blank that Marcus Freeman is throwing out the first pitch at a New York Mets game today.
I think it's awesome, and I'm glad that he went to that New York team and not the other one. So if I had to pick one, it's definitely going to be the Mets. So he's in the communication capital of the world, spreading the love of Notre Dame, and so do it at Citi Field, not the other one.
Yeah, and this is, you know, part of this New York blitz that that Marcus Freeman and a few of the players are doing. Like you saw Freeman, he was on ESPN yesterday. Sam Hartman was on ESPN yesterday. Freeman was actually on Good Morning Football, along with Jalen Smith. I forgot to mention, Jalen was a guest host on Good Morning Football today, and they had Marcus Freeman on, and we'll have some of the comments that he had from that
nice
up on the site later. But yeah, so but they're doing, you know, it's very interesting because, and I had forgotten that they did this at least last year, and I think the last couple of years. You know, Notre Dame doesn't have, you know, Notre Dame's not in a conference, and all these, like we had Big 12 media days this week, Big 10, right. SEC are going to be coming up, the ACC over the next few weeks, and this kind of takes the place of that. They just pack up, they go to New York, the media capital of the world, and you know they go to the media, they go to the sources, and like throwing out the first pitch at a Mets game is like, you know, as big as some of these other college, you know, maybe Nick Saban, like you know, they would want Nick Saban, but I can't imagine that in New York City, there's much of a demand for too many college football coaches to be throwing out first pitches, you know, other than, hey, the head coach of Notre Dame is going to be here. Heck yeah, we're going to have him on.
I mean, there you go.
It was interesting when he was on Good Morning Football, they actually dug up his NFL Combine film from when he was testing as a linebacker. He had a shaved bald head when he was in college, and he, you know, looked like a completely different guy. And you know, he was yoked a little bit more, but like he was saying, you know, he was like, maybe that guy's a little bit too heavy, you know, a little stiff in the hips and stuff like that. He said he was talking about when Kennedy Urlacher and Brian Urlacher, when they were visiting a while back, one of the assistants, because he played for a little bit with Brian Urlacher in Chicago. Okay. And you know, they were kind of giving him a hard time. He said that maybe Urlacher was saying maybe Marcus Freeman's hips were a little stiff back in the day. So, but you wouldn't think that by looking at Marcus Freeman, you wouldn't think, yeah, linebacker. Stiff hip guy.
Well, I wouldn't
well,
think linebacker either, but yeah,
yeah,
right. Agreed. He may even be faster now than he was back then. I mean, that's definitely
yeah,
possible.
yeah. Like I think his own analysis of himself was probably he didn't look like the most agile guy
That's
in the
funny.
world doing those linebacker drills. He was like doing some, like lateral movements and stuff like that, and some shuttles and things like that.
That's
It was
great.
good stuff. Yeah, but again, I think it's pretty unique that Notre Dame can just kind of pack up the jet and head to
Yeah.
New York
Yeah.
and do like a little media blitz like this, and there they are 2 days in a row on the big national outlets out there.
Well, and Sam Hartman was on Sports Center, I think,
Sports Center. Yep.
on Thursday, and
Right.
so yeah, they're doing the media blitz, and good for them. I mean, and for the 1 millionth time, anybody that says that Notre Dame doesn't have a national brand and isn't important, I direct you to this. Like, not name me another school that could do exactly what they're doing right now. The list is very short.
It is. Again, like Nick Saban in Alabama, like there's Kirby Smart, like a couple of those, basically those elite programs could pack up and do that, but they've won national championships.
Exactly.
Notre Dame hasn't, and yet they can still do that. And someone like Marcus Freeman is in demand.
Right. And is somebody like Kirby Smart or Nick Saban, are they being asked to throw out the first pitch anywhere outside of the South?
Exactly. It's one thing for Marcus Freeman to go to Chicago and do it, which he did earlier this year. But again,
to the wrong stadium,
for
whatever.
A school based in Indiana, for the head coach to be able to go to a New York Mets game, and they're like, yeah, throw out the first, like I said, I don't think there are too many college football coaches who would be in demand for something like that.
And this is the first game back after the All-Star break. I mean, yeah.
And they're playing the Dodgers to boot, so it's kind of a marquee game. So
exactly.
With Oklahoma set to join the SEC next season, its rivalry series with Oklahoma State is likely to go dormant, Vince. Here's what Oklahoma State head coach Mike Gundy said about the future of the Bedlam rivalry. When Oklahoma decided to leave the Big 12, they chose to end Bedlam. We're not responsible to change what we do because they left the conference. It's real simple. They chose to get into the SEC. That's the choice they made. End quote, Mike Gundy. So my question to you, Vince, is it good for college football if we're losing rivalries like this, if they're going by the wayside with all the realignment that's going on?
No, it's not good for college football because that's what college football is, in my opinion. Because you look at places like, you look at like the NFL, for example. Back in the 80s, the 60s, 70s, 80s, even to a degree the early 90s, rivalries were huge in the NFL. And then free agency came, and rivalries are still big for the fans, but they're not as big for the players.
As much for the players. That's right.
It's exactly right. And so I feel like that's the way things are going to start to become at the college level because of the transfer portal and because of conference realignment and all of those things. And that's what I love the most about college football is the rivalries. We always talk about, is such and such school still a rival with Notre Dame? Is it a rivalry? What's the best rivalry? All of those things. That's a shame that Oklahoma, when going to the SEC, doesn't make a point to continue the rivalry with Oklahoma State. Like it's embarrassing. It is such a money grab on their part, and it is not good at all for college football at all.
Yeah, I completely agree, especially like that's an in-state rivalry. And like my school, Kansas, when Missouri left for the SEC, that was one of the longest running, if not, it might have been I think it was the longest running rivalry in the nation, Kansas, Missouri. And it ended when Missouri left for the SEC. And Kansas, there were times, when Missouri wanted to play, and now they played in basketball last year, finally, for the first time after I think that they had played an exhibition a couple years back. But, like Missouri kind of wanted its cake and eat it too. They were like, oh, we'd still like to play that because they knew it would make them some money. It's like, well, you already took the money and you said you're leaving the conference. And that's, like you had that, Nebraska and Oklahoma used to be huge rivals. You know, they played last year, not nearly as big a deal now because, you know, one, Nebraska hasn't been as good, but two, it had been so long since they played. But that was a major rivalry in the Midwest, was Nebraska Oklahoma. Even Nebraska Colorado was a major rivalry for a while. Texas and Texas A&M, all these different. Now they're going to be able to get back together, you know, interestingly enough, because years after A&M left, here comes Texas now. They're getting back together, but I agree. You know, like even though that Notre Dame Miami was obviously very bitter, and they did away with that rivalry for different reasons because of how bitter and how, you know, kind of destructive it had become. There are times I still miss having that around. You know, like you think of that 88 season, besides the, you know, the USC out there in the Coliseum and obviously beating West Virginia in the Orange Bowl. I mean, I think that one of the first things that people think of when they think of that 88 season is Notre Dame Miami. And it sucks that really we only periodically get that. And it's really, when they play now, it's not a rivalry game at all. It's just another game. And like, you know, old heads like us, or maybe me, since, you know, you don't even remember that, you know, old heads like me, you know, that's, we talk about that. We want to talk about Catholics versus convicts and all that kind of stuff. And I think you said it. It's so much of what makes college sports, and it stinks that it's going away. I mean, you can argue, well, they'll find new rivals. It's just not the same as those organic rivalries that you grew up with. Just like Notre Dame and Michigan State, is that a rivalry anymore? They very rarely play.
No,
and it used to be an every year thing. You know,
Notre Dame Purdue used to be a rivalry that isn't anymore. You know, so I do want to pull this up because we're talking rivalries, and we're going to move on to a different topic. But D-Hawk says, has Southern Cal made any comments on the Notre Dame game and how it impacts their move to the Big Ten? I have not heard anything negative toward, like, that this rivalry is going to end anytime soon. So I don't see that being the case. I see them still playing every year. I don't see that going away at all.
Yeah, it seemed like last year after this came out, you know, that was talked about, that they planned on continuing it. And we've had RJ Abatia on a couple of times since then, and I know I asked him at least once, you know, when we had him on, about the future of the series, and it sounds like both sides are fully expecting it to go on.
Good
at this point. So
that's one I don't want to get rid of for sure.
No, and you know, I do wonder, you know, how much that mattered to them in making this move to the Big Ten. You know, like, if the Big Ten had said, no, you can't do it, like, would that have been, you know, a sticking point for USC? But hasn't really got to that point, it seems like. Yeah.
Dollar.
That's, you never know, because that's obviously what drove it to begin with.
Right.
Speaking of conference realignment, here's what Big 12 Deputy Commissioner Tim Weiser said this week about Texas and Oklahoma leaving for the SEC. I thought this was kind of juicy.
This is hilarious.
I think their decision was more about affiliating with the group of schools. They would rather get beat by Alabama than Kansas State, or Florida than Iowa State. So what do you think of that, Vince, when you hear Tim Weiser from the Big 12 say that?
I think that's hilarious, by the way, because first of all, the fact is that they were losing to Kansas State and Iowa State. And
especially Texas.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's awesome that he said that. It's like kind of rubbing it in the wound. It's like, okay, well, you don't want to lose to our guys. You just want to go lose to their guys. That's fine. Bye. Like, you know, obviously nothing he says is going to bring those guys back. But since they're moving, and since this is the last year, might as well throw some salt on the wound, baby. I love that. You want to talk about rivalries? He's kind of sticking it to him here, and I dig it. I think it's hilarious.
Yeah, he is. I mean, I think it's obviously a little bit of sour grapes, but at the same time, there's no one. I don't think anyone in the Big 12, you know, is shedding any tears.
Right.
That Texas is leaving now. You know, maybe Baylor and Texas Tech, because, you know, again, like when you talk about, you know, kind of like shoulder rivalries or whatever, they obviously they got a lot. You know, they sold out their stadium. You know, when Texas would come to town, you know, those were obviously big ticket games. And probably Oklahoma too, for that matter, but especially Texas, because it is Texas and those schools are in Texas. But yeah, again, I think it's a little bit of sour grapes. I think the ultimate move, by Texas and Oklahoma was what you were just talking about, the dollar bills there. But at the same time, like I said, there's no love lost by anyone in the Big 12, especially for Texas. I mean, Texas is largely responsible for the schools that I just mentioned a second ago, Nebraska, Missouri, and Colorado, all ultimately leaving the Big 12, because those were all original Big 8 teams.
Right.
They were there before the Southwestern Conference broke up, before Texas came in. There was concern when Texas and the Texas schools, but specifically Texas, there was concern that, too much of the conference was going to be run by down there in Texas. And that's ultimately what ended up happening. That, they all conceded to Texas, let them have their Longhorn network and all that stuff. And then here, lo and behold, 25 or so years later, now, they broke up what was a pretty good conference, and now they're just heading off for greener pastures and more dollars. So
absolutely.
Don't let the door hit you.
Exactly. Nobody, like you said, nobody is shedding tears that they're leaving. And DJ says it right here, Texas and Oklahoma are going to see some hostile crowds this year, more so than they probably would have in the past. No doubt about it. And they deserve every bit of it.
Yep, for sure. Going back to Marcus Freeman throwing out the first pitch, Shannon said the follow-up should be, does Freeman hit the mitt on the fly, or does he hop it to the catcher? Do you think he'll actually throw a strike tonight? What do you think he'll do?
Okay, Vince? Throw a strike and hitting the mitt are two different things, first of all.
True.
I look, number one, he's going to be prepared. There's no chance he doesn't throw from the mound, right?
Right.
So he's going to, if anything, it'll be high. There's no chance he one-hops it. So he's definitely going to hit the mitt. I don't know if he's going to throw a strike. I don't know enough about his background, but he's an athletic guy. Looks like he can throw to me. I say he hits the mitt.
He's done it 2 times already. The White Sox game that we talked about, he threw it out at a Notre Dame game this season as well. Okay. So I think he is well practiced. I think at the very least he hits the mitt. I don't think he bounces one.
No, that's embarrassing. You can't bounce it. And he will be going back to, 110 guys that will give him a hard time if he bounces it in.
That's exactly right.
So he's not bouncing it in. There's no way.
Fill in the blank. It's blank that the ACC has reached an agreement with the CW TV network to air a total of 50 football and men's and women's basketball games this season.
I think it's great because Notre Dame's going to get a cut, baby. So it's great. No, look, any way you can get more exposure for your league, the better off you're going to be. And the more deals that they make, the stronger that their league is financially and exposure-wise. Yeah, okay. You know what the CW is? That is a air channel. That is a channel that you can get over the air.
A national network. That's
fantastic. That's not something that you're going to need a subscription to get. You don't have to have ESPN to get the ACC network to watch those games. Now they're going to be on an air channel that everybody can get. I think that's great.
This is a network, the CW, that the Pac-12 was talking to a while back. The ACC was able to snatch it up. I think, the Pac-12's biggest problem, because we're still waiting for a TV contract to be announced. It sounds like their commissioner overpromised the schools the amount of money that they were going to deliver to them. And the TV networks are telling them,
nope,
that's not what you're getting.
Nope.
And so there still hasn't been a deal cut. And so the ACC being able to do this for, the troubles that the ACC is having of its own, it is huge because of what you were talking about. Like, these were games that were otherwise going to be, like on a regional sports network someplace, like the Raycom games. And I think Raycom is still going to produce it, so like, they're going to get a national broadcast. Is it it's not ABC, obviously, or NBC, but it is still, as you said, it is a national broadcast network that will not just be regional. These will be national broadcasts. So I think it's going to be big for the ACC. And like the men's and women's basketball games being in there, that's going to be good for a lot of people as well, because there are sometimes, like when Notre Dame plays and, you're like, okay, which network is that on? And then
Right.
you're like scrolling, like, can I find that? Do I even get that here? Even if it's streaming, you get the CW. So I think
Yeah.
it's going to be good. I think it's really good for the ACC, even though, it's not like a massive, like big splash type deal, but I think it's good. Anytime you can get your games on national broadcast and you kind of snatch it away from one of the other conferences that's in trouble.
It's
I think
win-win.
it's good for them. That's
Yeah,
right.
it's win-win. I dig it, man, because it's going to cost you actually a lot of the TVs have the antennas inside of them now, but like it's going to cost you a set of rabbit ears. Like
That's right.
That's great.
That's right. Fill in the blank. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to wear their creamsicle throwback uniforms later this season, and the creamsicles are blank.
Freaking awesome. Like, but I like them as throwbacks. They were ugly as sin back in the day.
That's what I was going to say. Like, I'm amazing how many people are professing their love for the creamsicles, because for so long it was like,
yes, they're terrible.
Wow,
they're terrible.
That's what you're wearing, that putrid orange.
Yeah, and the gear surrounding it, like what the coaches would wear, it was terrible. It was terrible. But it was so terrible that throwing back to it
now
is awesome.
Yes.
So one game, I'm down. Like I think it's fantastic.
That I would agree with. Like if they were going back to this full time, it would be like, nah. Because I remember when they switched over to that pewter look, and it was like, wow, those are pretty cool looking uniforms.
Love the pewter colors and uniforms. So like what they had back when like Mike Allstott and I loved those uniforms. And then they went to those weird like robot looking uniform. Those were horrible. Those were terrible. And then now they've gone back to the pewter look. That's their look. They need to stick with that look. But I'm cool with the one game throwback. I'm cool with it. I think those are great. I really do.
The old New England Patriots uniforms, like the ones that they wore in 1985 when they played the Bears in the Super Bowl. I know you've at least seen, you might not remember like actually seeing them in person, but I know you've seen, video of that game. Yes. But like at the time, it was like, those are okay. And then like the longer they, like when they finally switched, it's like, ooh, they've modernized. It looks cool. They've got silver and blue and all the, it's like, those look cool. But like now, it's just the same thing. They look really sharp when they wear them as a throwback. Like
exactly.
Same thing. Yeah.
Now, the ones that like if we're talking about the Patriots, right? So like the ones that they wore when Drew Bledsoe was the quarterback, you know which ones I'm talking about? They're a little more royal look.
The original blues, yeah.
Those I don't like those. And if they threw back to those, I don't think I would like them. You got to throw back further to the guy, the Patriot that's hiking the ball.
The red with the white helmets, the guy hiking the ball
exactly
and all that stuff.
Throw back to those, skip over the Royals, throw back to those, that's good. And then the uniforms they have now I think are pretty good as well. So but yeah, sometimes when you throw back, like when they would throw back to like when the Astros had like the rainbow, terrible, horrible. But when you throw back to them for like a game, okay, cool. I
think part of it is like the material is so much better now.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like they fit a little bit different. They're not like the, like back in the 80s with the nylon, like the coach's shorts. Like did your coach still have those in the 90s? Like the nylon double button coach's shorts.
Yes.
And like, that's what those, like, I remember, like squeezing into baseball uniforms back, like that's what those Astros uniforms, they did not look good on anybody, but now they're a little bit more, like they're less form fitting. They're a little bit looser. They have a little bit more give. Performance, not just the sheer polyester, I guess.
But I will also say there was a period there, and I don't remember if it was, I think it was Nike. That was one of their uniforms that they had in the catalog that they wanted, high schools and colleges to purchase. It's like that rainbow kind of a look, and you could pick what colors you wanted and the whole thing. Ugly. I didn't like it. There was no way I was going anywhere near those uniforms, but to throw it back for like one game, I dig it,
Yep. Stymie. Yep. The bike shorts.
Yeah,
that's
man.
Exactly what they were.
They literally called them coaching shorts. Like those are the coaching shorts. Like that's what they called them.
And almost every coach had them too.
Yes.
It was
like you had to have them in order to be a coach.
Right. That's right. And it was like,
thank goodness I missed that phase.
the sexy, your sexy coaches with the guts, spilling out
Just
over it.
spilling out over the top. I mean,
Oh,
there
my
was
goodness.
nothing led to the imagination because not only did you wear those shorts, but you tucked your shirt into them.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say. None of them were untucked. They all tucked their shirts down into those shorts too.
Yes.
Oh man.
Those were
the
classic. They were still wearing that crap. Some of the older coaches were still wearing those when I was playing in the mid to late 90s.
There was I was flipping around last night and there's always a Seinfeld episode. It was when the episode was called The Library. It like Jerry had this library book that was like 30 years overdue or something like that. And it turned out George had it. And George was accosted by the pervert gym teacher in the locker room. And he had that exact outfit that you're talking about. He had like the polo shirt.
Yep.
White polo shirt with a school logo tucked into the bike shorts.
Yes.
The
classic.
bike shorts very snug around the midsection.
Classic look. That's great.
Can't stand you. Oh. Okay, so here's a quick list of former players who are slated to take TV jobs this season. You got J.J. Watt. He's going to work in the CBS NFL Sunday studio. Matt Ryan also going to work for CBS NFL. I guess he's, as of now, like studio and games, might do a little both.
Okay.
You got Mark Ingram III. He's going to join the Fox Big Noon pregame kickoff show. And then Matt Castle will be in the studio for NBC's Big Ten primetime show. So my question is, which of those four do you think will outperform his football career in his new TV career?
So this one's easy because 3 out of the 4 had a pretty decent college or NFL career. The other one, not so much.
So you're saying Castle is a slam dunk?
I'm saying Castle's a slam dunk because I don't think he has to do that much to outperform his football career.
That's true.
But if we were just going to talk about who do I think is going to be the best and maybe have the longest career, I think I might have to go with Matty Ice. I feel like he could be very good in this role. He kind of looks like a guy who would be in the booth in the first place.
Yeah, he does.
And I think he's pretty well spoken. I got to hear a lot more of him when he was with the Colts, obviously for the 1 year, because we get more Colts, stuff up here as opposed to when he was in Atlanta. Mm-hmm. But I think he's a very well-spoken guy. I think he understands the game. I think he could be really good at it. And a close second would probably be J.J. Watt.
See, I'm wondering, is J.J. Watt going to live up to the hype? I think there's more expectation for him because of his career and his personality. Like he's done a lot of commercials and stuff like that. Like Gronk obviously has a personality, but it hasn't really translated into a broadcasting career. He's given it a shot. Right. It hasn't. Maybe it's just because he is just a total goofball and there's zero substance to it. I don't know. But so I feel like there's a lot more on Watt. That's a good point with Matt Ryan. I mean, you're talking about a high caliber quarterback who is also not going to be thrown into one of the big booths, like a guy like Drew Brees was right away. He's going to have a chance to kind of learn a little bit. I'll be curious to see sort of where he gets paired up, what games he
gets. Yeah, right.
I'm thinking Mark Ingram is probably going to end, like his college career was great, obviously, winning a Heisman and a national championship at Alabama. I mean, he had a good pro career, but it's not going to be a Hall of Fame pro career. But at the same time, like Reggie White was pretty solid in that Big Noon show. He wanted more money for a second straight year, so they let him walk and brought in Mark Ingram, without Ingram doing any work. So I'm guessing if they felt
who was it that they got rid of? Who?
Reggie Bush. I think I said Reggie White. Reggie Bush.
Yeah, I was like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Okay. So he's taking
he's
taking Reggie Bush's place.
He's taking Reggie Bush's place.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think he was probably the third wheel in there anyway when you're talking about the Brady Quinn, Reggie Bush, and Matt Leinart. I felt like he was kind of the third wheel of that threesome. So if they were going to lose one, I would have said, okay, you can lose Reggie Bush. So
right.
I'm okay with that.
Curious to see what Castle can do. And really, yeah, I've seen a lot of names. I'll have to kind of dig up what I can find, like who else is going to be involved in that. It won't take too long till we find out. But I'm really curious. Like, you're probably right. Like considering the question that I posed, Castle has the best chance based on the career.
It's a low bar.
I'm kind of looking forward, though. Brian and I have been talking, and I think like during the season, I'm gonna kind of do some write-ups, like on the different pregame shows and stuff like that.
Okay.
Things they're saying about Notre Dame and how accurate they are with some of their predictions and things like that. So yeah. So I'll be curious. I am curious to see what this NBC primetime thing looks like, as well as how much Notre Dame talk maybe kind of gets carried over into it. Since there'll be a Notre Dame game before and leading into a Big Ten game that night, what the coverage looks like.
Yeah, for sure. It's going to be. I am still at the moment. I am more of a the Fox Big Noon kickoff guy at this point. See if NBC can sway me a little bit. We'll see.
Yeah, I know you like the Fox Big Noon a little bit more. I've watched a little bit more Game Day over the last couple of years.
Okay,
but again, I'm going to start recording both and watch more.
Well, and the problem was we were doing our show at the exact same time as Game Day and Big Noon kickoff. So last year didn't see really either one.
Exactly.
I'm happy we're going to be able to get back to watching that a little bit.
And I've also got a media guy coming on next week, podcaster, and we're going to talk a little college football media next week. So
nice. How did your interview go last night? I want to watch that.
It was good. It was good. Danielle Green, really good. She was very, very good. Had a lot of trying to think of how I wanted, like for someone who's gone through what she went through, she lost a hand in Iraq from an explosive going off when she was an MP over there. She's got a great attitude right now and, just seems to be doing really good things. And she's directing that into now, helping other, wounded warriors, wounded veterans. She's working for the Wounded Warrior Project full time. So really good. I think you'll enjoy it.
Okay. That's on my docket of things to do tonight.
Yes. She called Muffet McGraw her original drill sergeant, by the way.
I love that.
Coffees for Closers. Tropic of Cancer. That's right. That was the book in the Seinfeld episode I was talking about.
Oh, very nice.
Was the book that was missing. And Jerry ended up at the end of the episode, wrote there was like the library detective was after him to recover the book and all that kind of stuff. And he wrote out a check for the late fee and all that kind of good stuff. So it was good. All right. Well, that's going to do it for tonight. Short and tight, 1 hour. Wrapped it up, about an hour flat. Have a great weekend. And we will talk to you on Monday. Next week, my last week.
That's right.
Before vacation, I'll be off for a week. And then we've got all kinds of good stuff we're going to talk about next week, though. So looking forward to that. Wait. Smash the like button on your way out. We appreciate you being here. Have a great weekend. And we will talk to you Monday on IB Nation Sports Talk.